You want to start this? Please introduce yourself and go.
Absolutely. So I'm Bessie Bronstein. I'm with TOAS. I'm here in place of Bryn today because I've been the one handling these settlements for all of our cities. So what this is there are 2 class action settlements that the city has been automatically opted into. One is against 3M and one is against DuPont, but we'll be handling them at the same time with pretty identical paperwork. So what this is there is a chemical, I'm just going to call it, we put the full name, but PFAS is what they really are. There's several subtypes of it, but PFAS embodies all of it. They are a contaminant that has entered pretty much everyone's water supply. What essentially they are, so they're a particulate that is made to never disappear. They're called forever chemicals. They are in nonstick pans, they're in dental floss, they're in fracking materials, they're in pretty much anything you could think of. Initially, when we were using these, or we began, you have, an insignificant amount for every day for 20 years, suddenly you have a significant amount. So PFAs are, statistically, we know they're in our water supplies, we know they're in our bodies, we know that they're just essentially everywhere at this point. So doesn't mean we can detect them at this point, but statistically we know they're there. They're in the water cycle, we know that they're present. So PFAs, we are aware though that they are causing health problems in people. They're building up in kidneys and livers and lungs and causing long-term health problems in people. So what this settlement is that it specifically targets 3M and DuPont for a substance that they were adding to fire department water that made the water more effective at putting out fires. The water was sticky, essentially, and it would smother the fire at a higher rate than regular unprocessed water. Of course, it's literally water rate than, say, a nonstick pan would, right? So what this is that we are already opted in. So if we want to remain in, no action has to be done at this time. And I'll go into kind of the pros and cons of staying in or opting out. If we opt out, we have to act today. We have to authorize your city manager or your whoever you want to designate to submit some paperwork, and it needs to be sent out today to get it to the claims administrator in time to opt out of the settlement. So entering into this settlement is a waiver. We would be in this settlement, but by entering into this settlement against DuPont and 3M, we cannot in the future sue 3M or DuPont for damages related to PFAS. It's one and done, and we'd be done once we enter this one. If we opt out, we can sue them in the future if we wanted, or we can participate in future settlements that go against those 2 companies. So, as y'all are probably aware, a few weeks ago, Fort Worth, after not communicating with anyone about it for months and months, asked their clients to opt out of this event. I can tell you at this point that very few cities have done what Fort Worth has asked them, and I'll get into that in a second. But Fort Worth wants everyone to opt out, and Fort Worth has authorized outside counsel to sue DuPont and 3M and a variety of other manufacturers to try to get a higher settlement than this. Fort Worth does not believe that the money amount that they would be receiving from this settlement is anywhere near enough that they would need to repair their water systems. We fully expect that the EPA will be passing, we know it's coming. There's some in comment period right now. They'll be passing stricter regulations that would require a higher level of filtration to remove these PFAS from water supplies. As Fort Worth does the majority of filtration, they're the ones who would be footing the bill. I can tell you from conversations with Chris, with Public Works over at Fort Worth, he fully expects this to be a thing that occupies him for the rest of his career in Fort Worth. We'll be handling PFAS settlements. It doesn't, and I mean, Saginaw may be better off taking the money now, whatever money that may be. There's not a guarantee that you'll get any money from this. It depends, there's a lot of factors in play, but it depends on, can we show that there is some amount of PFAS in our system, or can we show that there is likely PFAS in our system and we need to repair things in order to help rid that PFAS. And that could be rebuilding water towers that may or may not be lined with PFAS material that is in turn leaching into the systems. It could be replacing pipes that are lined with PFAS that are contaminating the water after it gets to us, right? So I expect that there is some amount of money in terms of the settlement. Explain, I can give you a range between 4,000 and 250,000, right? So it's not a helpful number for me to give you based on that. So if you opt in, you would be waiving future chances to sue or settle against 3M or DuPont, but you would be receiving money, if you do receive any money, sooner. If you opt out of the settlement, you would be, and I'll also say, Fort Worth does not expect us to join in on suing. They will be handling that lawsuit. We would have an expectation of receiving benefit from that lawsuit. Even if we did not receive directly from that lawsuit, they filter the water. So that's on them. It would still benefit Saginaw eventually, right? So if we opt out, though, there is a non-zero chance that 3M goes bankrupt before another settlement against them is able to, you know, be settled, come to fruition and be done. Class action settlements are extremely complicated, especially in Texas. These current lawsuits did not start in Texas. They started in states that are much more friendly to consumer settlement lawsuits, toxic tort lawsuits. Texas is not a friendly state to guarantee that anything Fort Worth does would in turn pay off to Saginaw. So while it may be, you know, it's a possibility that we wait, that we opt out, we wait for Fort Worth and see what they do or what other groups be, we know. I also believe that repairs are going to have to be done on our water systems before any money really comes in from these settlements. It will be a while before this money comes in. If y'all are familiar with the opiate settlements that y'all have been involved with, those took years and years after we entered them to receive any money. And those were handled in Texas, not by private law firms in a different state. So I think that we need to be aware that we are going to be doing repairs before any money comes in, and it's a matter of when we can recoup the money to try to repair our systems. So what questions do y'all have for me?
I bet we have a few questions. Who wants to start? Paul, go ahead.
Yeah. You know, fire, and then some fire stuff. Can we still go after them for this, or if we take the settlement, are we done from doing any legal action against them at all?
The firefighters should not be barred in their personal capacity from suing 3M. The city, so I don't think the city would be barred in personal injury. They would be barred from collecting money for filtration, but you should not be barred from personal injury settlements. So that should not affect that. But the firefighters may have to sue in their personal capacity, though, in the future. But that would be a long ways down the road. So, did you have
Nick?
Yes, I know that Trinity River Water Authority is also not supporting this. In other words, they're against it.
TRA opted in, or unless they changed their plan.
I thought they opted out.
They had said 3 weeks ago they were going to opt out, and then they sent an email out to most of their cities that they were going to be opting in and did not care what their cities were going to do. So unlike Fort Worth, which has instructed their cities to follow a certain path, TRA said, we don't care. We're going to get ours anyway, so we don't care what y'all do. Fort Worth seems to have concerns, and let me be clear, it's not a concern for y'all. It's a concern on them collecting and whether if y'all opt in, does it reduce their potential settlement in the future, right? It's not necessarily them
About
worrying about
Dallas
y'all's
and
water. Dallas and Arlington have both opted out and are likely to sue directly.
Here's my big concern with this has been known.
I'm sorry, Arlington was supposed to opt out and last second opted in. Dallas has opted out.
My big concern of this is you're not, I mean, in the big scheme of things, the risk.
Okay.
So, say you're just off my head with what little bit of knowledge I have, and I look at both of these. The probability of something bad's going to happen is great, and whatever happens is not going to be good, both to cities, both to our infrastructure, and both to our citizens. And if we're talking about, let's say, $20,000 to even, let's say $250,000, just one piece of equipment we've got within our water system's going to eat that up. You know, so I'll just say, how bad this is like they're still researching exactly how much contaminant is out there because it keeps building on it. You know, where's the bottom of the well, so to say, as to how bad this is really going to be.
Sure.
So I'll just from a council member, since this came up, and research I've done, some scientists I've reached out to today and talked to, I think we ought to opt out of this. That's just personally me. What I've looked at, the amount of money we're going to get in hand right now versus the risk that our city and citizens is going to take is too great. Even if 3M files bankrupt in 6 years from now, we get nothing. You know, in the big scheme of things, if this keeps going the way it is, I mean, of course, you read reports of how bad it could get. This is probably going to be somewhere in the middle. It's how far to the left it deviates versus how far to the right. It's still, to me, I'm leaning toward we opt out.
Tyler, you got any questions? Cindy?
So with this lawsuit or this legislation that comes to stop the PFA, how long is that gonna take effect? So are they gonna continue to use their products?
So 3M is not supposed to be using PFAs anymore. Nor DuPont. They are supposed to be limiting that use and phasing that use out. I mean, that's up to the regulators. I don't know how quickly they can put a stop to that and how many products it's in. But that is supposed to not be happening anymore with those two companies. They're supposed to be limiting PFAs. As far as how long we have before EPA regulations kick in, there's a comment period happening right now. I would expect by the end of 2025, there's new regulations. Currently, there is not and correct me if I'm wrong, but there is not a mandated amount of PFAs that are allowed to be in water. But at the same time, I can also assure you that the majority of water sources have PFAs in an amount under 4 parts per trillion. And I can tell you that because that's the lowest amount that we can detect. And if we can't detect PFAs, we still assume PFAs are there, but we can't give you a number, right? Because we can't detect below that 4 parts per trillion.
Can you explain to people the difference between detection and measuring?
Maybe. So detection would be that we know it's there, right? There's some amount present, even if we can't give you a quantity of particulates that are in the water. A measure would be an amount, right? That we can give you a concrete digit. There are 3 parts per trillion, or there are 7 parts per trillion. Most water sources in the area are under 4 parts per trillion because we can't detect them. Carswell, or whatever they call it now, it's in their water. We know that, and we believe Lake Worth has it as well.
And you said this is cumulative, so as we use water, and we bring that cycle back in, we're adding to those,
To a certain extent. Yes, ma'am. So we can flush it out, right? So you have a tank of water, right? And as you add clean water in, the amount will diminish. But as, say, we go through a drought and your water level drops, the PFAS amount will rise, right? Because you have less volume that you're distributing the PFAS through. That being said, if you had, you know, a vacuum where you have this water and you keep adding more water in, if the water's at this, it depends on how clean the water you're adding in is, right? So, sure. So all you can really do concretely would be to filter it as it comes out. And you can also, you know, if there's PFAS in the lining of the water tank itself, obviously you can repair that to, or remove that and replace that to lower the amount of extraneous PFAS that are leaching into the water afterward. That being said, we do know it's in the water cycle. Over time, we expect we can remove it in part from the water cycle, but that is a 100-year process. That's not a quick process.
So the scary part of this is, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, this is kind of like heavy metals, and as the human body consumes this, it collects in your kidneys and liver, and it doesn't leave. Our body isn't good at flushing this out. So even though you get a little bitty dose now, over your period of your lifespan, that adds up and it becomes toxic and can cause you liver and kidney problems.
I understand that, but I also know as it goes through the system
Yeah.
and wastewater is brought back in,
Oh, yeah,
they're
it's
probably
like-
delivering it back in as well, and then it
Yeah.
accumulates as things cycle through.
And we
The
can
other
assume.
question I have, and I don't know if you can answer this,
Okay.
is, if our pipes and towers are aligned with this PFA, is Fort Worth gonna turn around and sue us to help them, repair their water system?
Fort Worth has no remedy. No, we have a duty to Fort Worth as far as what our water towers are concerned. Fort Worth owes us a duty to give us, that they're filtering for us, that we're returning. No, I can't. Well, so is the process that y'all are using, you have wastewater that is, you believe is probably contaminated or leaching, and it's being sent to Fort Worth to filter, returned to Fort Worth, and then it cycles back to us? No, I can't imagine that. That's such a convoluted way to reach a remedy. They could try, but I would be very shocked. I think we can to help subsidize
That's
their
what's gonna
lawsuit.
happen.
Yeah, to help,
Big time.
yeah, they're,
It's a good,
yeah,
That's a
they're
good
not
way to
gonna
put
pay
it.
a dime for their lawsuit. Their wholesale clients are gonna pay for this lawsuit. So we can expect your water rates to go up regardless of what we do in the city, because Fort Worth is going to pass on that expense. I will say, Chris said, their public works director said that they do not expect to be differentiating in how they pass on the cost between who opts in and who opts out. I'll also tell you the vast majority of cities I've been to just remained in. Most of the Toast cities have remained in. I can count on one hand the cities who have opted out. So it would be, if they aren't targeting anyone individually, we expect everyone's rates to go up. And if y'all were to opt out, which it sounds like you're not leaning toward, or you are leaning toward that, or if you were to opt in, I don't expect it to make a difference on how Fort Worth passes on the expense.
Mary, questions? No. We'll come back to you. Go ahead, Mary.
I know at least in the 80s they started, because I read about a Greenpeace protest in the 80s, so I know that they've been around. I don't know when they became as prominent as they are now. I know that if you have nonstick pans that are over 10 years old, they're in your pans. So I can tell you that. But I don't know an exact date. So.
And a question maybe for Gabe, which doesn't have to do with the decision we have to make today, but how did we find out, and when did we start acting upon trying to find out what kind of problem we have and how much that would cost?
So I think that we'd wait until there is guidance from the EPA and TCEQ that would mandate public water systems to test and or remediate. So the vast majority, as Bessie mentioned is going to be on the provider side, which would be Fort Worth, but we'll do what we're advised to do.
And then about the decision we have to make today, I feel like I agree with Nick that the possibly very small amount that we may receive if we opt in and the unknown amount is not a good enough reason to opt in when the advantages of opting out seem greater to me than the advantage, one advantage of opting in. If I understand everything correctly.
Yeah, I can shed some light on the timeframes. They've stopped producing the AFFF foam probably about 15 years ago, but I just looked up and 3M plans to, they're gradually phasing this out, and they're planning on having it phased out by 2025. So they're still making this stuff.
Okay.
That's what I was afraid of, still using it.
It's also used as, for fire protective clothing for fire service, but also for children's clothes and stuff like that.
Think about it kind of like asbestos or lead, right? It's in everything, and it helps keep fires away, so, or at least suppresses them. So that,
Anything else? Cindy, do you think of your question? Go ahead. Okay.
So, with the cities that are opting out, those that stay in, how are those percentages broken up? Is it broken up by the number of cities that are participating, or is it divided up by, the population?
for the distribution of settlement,
Yes.
so, both. So it has to do more with water flow. So it's going to be, they're going to take all of the cities that have opted in, right, that are remaining in the settlement, and they will be looking at the number of, so in this action, the class is made of public water service providers. So it's not actually necessarily municipalities, it's the PWS, it's a public water supplier. So what they're going to be looking at is water flow within the city and the number of customers that you serve. And then they're going to be crossing that with the amount of PFAS contamination. If you're under 0.4, you're assuming, or whatever it is, 4 parts per trillion, you're essentially it's customers. I would say by household, not by person. So let's say water bills, water flow, amount of particulate, and probably how, how much of this we actually have to worry about, right? If Fort Worth is doing 99% of the filtration, Fort Worth, we may only be entitled to 1% of the remedy, depending on how the fairness and reasonableness hearing on this is in February. If they come up and the judge says, y'all messed this up, 9 months ago, we would just start from scratch and everything would start over again. So, well, they would start over again, and then we would figure it out in 2 years when they, come to a conclusion. So,
One final question.
Go ahead.
yes, ma'am.
How does, and this may be for Gabe, how does our industrial district affect this water supply? I mean, are we concerned about them adding contaminants to the water as well, or the wastewater?
Requirements. It's essentially what Matt Reeves do all day, every day. In the absence of guidance and regulation, I'm not aware that there's any testing or sampling for PFAS, but it sounds like will happen in the future.
Correct. Yeah, there's no requirement to test at this point. If you opt into the settlement, then there are some requirements that come in, but opting out does not bring with it requirements to test. We expect at the end of 2025 that testing will be occurring. Obviously, if the city chooses to, they can test beforehand. I don't know how expensive that is, but I would think so. As far as what you're concerned about with the runoff from the industrial district affecting, you should be, I think the concern is valid, but I would also say we can operate under the assumption that Saginaw has good water right now. that even if there are PFAs in the water, we don't need to be incredibly concerned about the amount of PFAs in it yet.
Well, my big concern is what you mentioned earlier that really got my attention, was talking about us having to fix our water system or rehab our water system. That's what worries me. I want our citizens to be confident in the quality of our water. That may be a multi-year thing. I would love for Gabe and Randy to take a look at that and think, in the future, what could we do? And start putting some dollars to that or estimates to that, because that may come back to us regardless of settlement or not. It sounds like we have to do something in the future. And I want us to have the best possible quality water we can. I think everyone does. So let's take a look at that. That's outside of the scope of the water, but at least something to be a little proactive there, just to think about it and see what we might have to do and what could be impacted. I don't know complete answers yet. We're $100,000. Let's start thinking about it. As far as the law itself, honestly, the more I thought about it, I'm inclined to stay in, because I don't think we're guaranteed a dime if it goes out, and we may not get that many dimes anyhow. I understand that. I don't know, but it doesn't sound like even for rehabbing our system, any settlement will be sufficient to what we'll have to spend. So that may be neither here nor there. It would be help, but it wouldn't be the full thing. So I think it is. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball to know how it's going to work out. That's really what we're trying to figure here. So it's a sticky situation, but it's interesting, and I'm glad we're talking about it. And I do thank everyone for coming in on a Saturday. I apologize for doing a Saturday, but I think, Betsy, I appreciate you coming here and all the folks coming on a Saturday. I know it's an extraordinary situation. So any other questions, comments? Folks, anything else? Come on up. If you want to, you're here, ask a question. Introduce yourself, though, please.
Benjamin Guttery. I'm a homeowner here in Saginaw, and I'm also on the board of Saginaw Springs HOA. And I came here for a different reason today, but if it's a similar size city like Watauga or something, or if it's a similar size city that maybe has more tax dollars that can afford to front a lawsuit, I'd just be interested to hear,
Yeah. So Dallas and Fort Worth are opting out. Northlake has opted out. Northlake opted out because they believed that the TRA was going to opt out, and then the TRA opted in. So I don't know how they're feeling about that now, but Northlake opted out. Aledo opted out, or is expected. Yeah, Aledo's supposed to have sent their couriers last night, so they opted out, and then Watauga, and I believe Keller has opted out. So everyone else that we represent has opted in, and we, for context, represent about 30 cities in the area. So I'm trying to think about how big y'all are compared to others.
I think we're about the same population as Watauga and
Watauga.
similar kind of
I
railroad
can tell you
community. I
Halton-
think they have a little bit more retail kind of tax base than we do, but yeah.
I can tell you that Haltom City opted in after many, many conversations. I think that Greg was kind of talking with Gabe a little, but but some cities, so some of our smaller cities, Edgecliff, for example, and other small cities like that, were sort of under the idea of, well, we're so small, we're going to get so little, let's just stay in and see what we're going to get. I was in Richland Hills yesterday, and Richland Hill, or 2 days ago, and they were just like, well, let's see what happens. We've got to opt in because 3M is probably going to go under in the next 3 or 4 years anyway, from what their stocks are doing. So let's just see what we can get. So that's the mindset on a lot of our cities has been, let's see what we can get, or it's too late and too close to the holidays, so we're not going to call a session, or we're already in it, let's just stay in it because the paperwork is really going to be a burden, and let's just see what happens.
So my second kind of part to that, so the city council understands what other cities, so Keller, Watauga, Aledo, are kind of one staying out, and then the big ones, but it's based off of customers, so a household or a industrial user. My kind of first part of that question is, how would an apartment complex count? Because there's 300-400 units there, but only one user, and then when are they taking how many users are in each city? Because if you even take ours from 2020, it's vastly different than what it's going to be whenever this thing kind of ends up. Are they going to count 20,000 users or 30,000 users? Because we just added several thousand new units in the city.
So the amount of, do both. So the way they would calculate how many users you have would be at the time that we test. So in order to enter into the settlement, we've entered all of your water sources, and then within a month of that testing, submit those test results to the claims administrator. My understanding would be at that moment would be the number of customers. It wouldn't be, I would expect that, because at least from when I lived in an apartment, some apartments you have your own water bill anyway. I would assume it'd be divvied up. I don't believe that was explained in the settlement paperwork or accounted for, but I would expect it to be divvied up. It wouldn't just be one person for the 10,000 people in the complex or whatever the number is.
It doesn't have to do with total volume of the city as well, volume.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, council, any other questions, comments, concerns? We don't have all the answers, but we have what we have right now. So, Betsy, explain to me, my understanding, if we opt in or stay in, no action is required. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If we opt out, we have to turn in something by Monday.
It needs to be in the claims administrator's hands by Monday,
Right,
so it would
okay.
need to be sent out.
Which is why we're meeting today. So, okay. Folks, if, all those in favor of opting out, raise your right hand. I have 1, 2, 3. All those opposed? Are you voting yes? All right, then we have 4. All those opposed? That's 2. So the council is 4-2 to opt out. We're opting out. All right. We'll do the paperwork. Let's go. Good luck to us. Anything else on this topic while we're here? Anything? We all good? Gabe, we good?
There for me.
You wrote down for Janice who made the motion and everything else? Are you taking notes? Okay. You or Lee? Excellent. All right. Thank you, sir, for coming out. If you have any questions about something on the agenda, Gabe and Lee can help you out with anything, and we'll be happy to help you in the future. I don't want to, I'm sorry we can't talk to you, but honestly, legally, we cannot discuss something on the agenda. We could go to jail for that.
I'll get it on the next meeting.
No, we're happy to help you out, though, but thank you for coming out. All right, then, what time we got? At 3:35, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, I make a motion, we adjourn.
All in favor?